An outcry in Egypt after a number of TV stations are swiftly shut down after the interim president is sworn in. What's behind the crackdown and what message are Egypt's new rulers sending to the outside world? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hazem Sika. It's a new political dawn in Egypt and a new reality for the country's media. Egypt's military has shut down 4 religious TV stations, banned the Muslim Brotherhood's newspaper and raided the offices of Al Jazeera's Egypt affiliate, sparking outrage from rights groups around the world. It's an all-out crackdown on media considered sympathetic to ousted President Mohammed Morsi. Muslim Brotherhood channel Masr 25 and others were taken off the air on Wednesday night following a military coup that removed Morsi. Now, the move is prompting questions about just how free the media can now be in Egypt under the new transitional government that's being formed. Nick Toksvig reports.
Caught on audio, the moment Egyptian security raid and shut down Al Jazeera Arabic's live service, Mubashir Maz. Shortly afterwards, the main Al Jazeera Arabic channel is also taken off air. The authorities claim Mubashir was operating without a proper broadcasting license, though the channel has been established in Egypt for several years. No reason was given for shutting down Al Jazeera Arabic, but the station, along with other channels, had just aired a defiant speech by Mohammed Morsi as he was being ousted as president. Staff were taken to a nearby police station and questioned for several hours. Transmission equipment was confiscated, and both channels remain unable to broadcast live from Egypt. The global news agency Associated Press Television News, or APTN, was told by Egyptian authorities to deny Al Jazeera channels access to their live Egyptian coverage. And a local service provider, Cairo News Company, was told not to provide Al Jazeera with broadcasting equipment like satellite trucks. Al Jazeera Media Network's acting Director General, Mustafa Suag, condemned the actions.
The freedom of the media has to be respected. We condemn the fact that the authorities in Egypt are trying to intimidate our staff, frightening them, trying to prevent them from doing their job.
The Al Jazeera Media Network includes this station, Al Jazeera English. Along with Al Jazeera Arabic and Al Jazeera Mubashir, the network remains committed to objective reporting in the Middle East and elsewhere.
No matter what the outcome is in the coming days, media freedom is something that must be part of Egypt's transition.
The Al Jazeera Media Network has demanded the immediate release of its staff members, as well as the urgent return of broadcast equipment. Nick Toksvig, Al Jazeera.
Well, let's bring in our guests now. From Cairo, we have Bashir Abdel Fatah. He is the editor-in-chief of the magazine Al Ahram Democracy Review. He's also a professor at Cairo University. From London, Adel Darwish, political editor of the Middle East magazine. And here in Doha, we have Keulen, who's the general director at the Doha Center for Media Freedom. Good to have you all with us, gentlemen. Keulen, I want to start with you. Now, the Egyptian military, when they maneuvered this whole transition of power, what has been called a military coup by its detractors, said that they were simply carrying out the will of the people. But surely that has to be called into question when a selected number of television stations and publications are simply taken off the air.
Yeah, sure. I think this is a big setback for press freedom in Egypt. And you know, the Muslim Brotherhood still represents a major political force in Egypt, and silencing their media, it's basically undemocratic, and it goes against press freedom. And I know there is a big discussion, is this a coup or is this not a coup? But this looks very much like the scenario of a coup, when the military take over the Ministry of Information, and when they close down television stations and newspapers.
Adel Darwish, is this an ominous warning for journalists and media operators in Egypt?
Well, I don't think so. However, as a journalist, I can never, ever agree, condone censorship or involving journalists in politics. We had problems here, as you know, with the Lieberson inquiry, and we're resisting that. During the IRA campaign of violence, Lady Thatcher managed to get a court order to ban interviewing the IRA terrorists or spokesman defending terrorists. But I think there's quite a few bits and pieces missing from your report in Cairo. I really would like to know, have actually your office, Al Jazeera, sort of challenged them legally, ask them to show what part of sort of the regulations of broadcast they violated. Number one. Number two,
well, we have done that, and that is something that is certainly ongoing right now. But up to this point, there hasn't been a clear explanation. But that's okay. Carry on what you were saying.
No, I just, you know, as a journalist, I'm just saying I would love to know, have they also, what kind of legal representation they have done, because it's actually disturbing thing. I mean, there was a report by fellow journalists in Egypt on Sunday, in fact, that the Muslim Brotherhood station 25th of January were actually broadcasting live the home addresses of female presenters and journalists from rival secular stations or anti-Morsi stations. So I think I really need to know a little bit more about the legal background under which they sort of done this censorship.
Well, let's talk to a journalist in Egypt now, Bashir Abdel Fatah. What do you make of what's happened in the country over the last couple of days, and how would you characterize the atmosphere right now for journalists operating inside Egypt?
First of all, Hazem, I would like to thank you for having me in your program and with your colleague. I think in the beginning that the relationship between the authorities in Egypt, otherwise it was Mubarak, it was Muslim Brotherhood, or the military council, the relationship between the authority in general and the media in Egypt has some problems for so long. I think the authorities do not have patience for the freedom of press in our society. During the Mubarak era, there were tough measures against the media, different types of the media, even the new media in particular. During the military council era, after Mubarak stepped down, there were also many problems with the media because they don't accept to be criticized by some media, even the new media as well. During Morsi, in fact, he was all the time criticizing the media, who was condemning him all the time, but he was careful to take tough measures against this media. But nowadays, and after Morsi's step down, there are tough measures against the media that should support Dr. Morsi and his followers. So I think now we are taking steps back in the freedom of press. And I think the international reactions prove that Egypt now is suffering from the freedom of press crisis and the lack of freedom of press. In Egypt as a whole, I think we are on the eve of a confrontation between Islamists and both the protesters of Dr. Morsi and the military as well, because now you are trying to isolate Islamists and their media as well. As you know, we are so close to Ramadan, and Ramadan is a special occasion for Islamists in these TV channels, Islamic TV channels. So everybody now is in the street. He asks us, do they return this TV channels? We are waiting for Ramadan and the religious programs, not only to condemn the military or the second wave of the revolution against Dr. Morsi, but we are trying to watch this TV because Ramadan and the religious programs and interviews and so on. So I think now we are on the eve of confrontation. And I think the authorities now in Egypt know well that those TV channels were an instrument of mobilization against either the military or the authorities in general. That's why they try to stop the mobilization that those channels can make in the future for the supporters of Dr. Morsi against the military and the new administration in Egypt.
Well, this crackdown affected not only local and regional media, but global news organizations like the Associated Press, which is a news organization that does a lot of business with Al Jazeera in Egypt. And I'm going to read out to you now the letter that they sent to the Al Jazeera media network, because as part of this crackdown, they were forced to deny access to any live signals to Al Jazeera anywhere in Egypt. And they, as I said, they sent this letter, which I'm going to read to you a part of it to you now. We have strenuously protested against this unjust suppression of free reporting to the authorities and security services in Egypt, and are continuing to do so. This raises worrying and significant issues of press freedom, which the Associated Press has a proud history of defending. However, we are left with no choice but to insist Al Jazeera immediately stops using our live signals from Egypt, as you will be in breach of contract if you continue to do so. So, I mean, Adel Darwish, it says something about just how broad and opaque this crackdown is when an organization like the Associated Press is forced into this position.
Well, again, you see, I really need to see the letter. What exactly parts of the broadcast license that Associated Press say Al Jazeera was violating? I mean, I've been a journalist for 47 years, and I really always wary of taking things out of context, because we also have here, because you see, broadcast is slightly different from print journalism. We don't have laws in Britain, and thank God for that, and we'll resist any laws to govern print media. But because broadcast license given by Ofcom, Office of Communication, there are certain sort of rules to apply to the license, even here in Britain. So we have to, I really need to know more. What exactly is the Associated Press say that the Al Jazeera violated? I'm not quite sort of clear.
Well,
does the letter
essentially they're saying that they were forced into this position by the authorities in Egypt. As I said, they're an organization that does a lot of business with Al Jazeera in Egypt.
Yeah, I know, but you see, I mean, it's just taking it out of context. I think also for the gentleman who's speaking before me, I'm really sorry I didn't write his name, is the from Egypt. I don't know how old is he, but when I was a reporter in the region, I can say that both under Mubarak and sort of the last 2 years, the media in Egypt have never been freer since 1952, Colonel Nasser's coup. Under Colonel Nasser, it was a Stalinist state that only 4 or 5 newspapers owned by the state and his party, that actually even those organizations were actually heavily censored inside. So he has to put things in historic context, and that the media has never been freer. It started freeing a bit under Sadat, really free under Mubarak, which actually helped to topple him, and obviously went out of hand, which is good, in the last couple of years. So he has to be careful what to ask for. We really need to look more into it, and I think we need to go down the legal. I always found it with the authority is actually playing it their own game by actually the legal process. And actually, my last word is, I'm from an old school of journalism, which is reporting what actually happened for people to read tomorrow, or reporting what's happening now, but never to speculate. I think my colleague in Egypt was making some speculation about the future. Again, I'm from the old school of journalism. I don't like to make speculation. I like to deal with the covering news and events as it happens now.
Jan Keulen, what implications do you think this has for Al Jazeera? Why do you think they were included in this crackdown?
Well, I think they were perceived as being pro-Muslim Brotherhood, and it is as simple as that. And I think it shows, how the military think about media, and maybe how political forces think about media. And looking back over the last 2 years since the revolution in January 2011, I think a lot of time has been lost and a lot of opportunities have been lost to really create an atmosphere of press freedom. Because yes, some of the media were more free than before, obviously, but there was really a lack of good journalism, and actually Al Jazeera Mubashir maybe is an exception to that, because they have been doing, in my view, a very good job. But there were a lot of new voices, a lot of new satellite channels, a lot of new publications, a lot of new websites, but there was also a lot of political incitement, and the media became very polarized. And yes, people took the freedom to speak, but there were not really guarantees for freedom.
Indeed, that is a valid point. I want to put that then to Bashir Abdel Fatah, and indeed Adel Darwish made this point earlier that up until the last couple of days, the state of media in Egypt could be characterized as it's never been freer, really. There's been so many stations that have cropped up since the January 25th revolution of 2011, but at the same time, many of them were very opinionated. And what does that mean going forward? Are the media outlets that are still there, are they going to have to watch what they say now?
Yeah, with respect to him, I don't agree with Dr. Adel Darwish because we have some sort of freedom of press in Egypt, even during the Mubarak era. In the last 5 years of Mubarak era, we touched really a big margin of freedom of expression. Otherwise, how could we create the revolution of January if there is no margin of expression and freedom of press? I think there were many private TV channels that criticized the regime during Mubarak. It was really avoiding criticizing Mubarak and his family, but the government and many politicians and statesmen were criticized in these TV channels and also the private newspapers in Egypt. So I cannot claim that we have a complete freedom of press. I doubt if any country worldwide has 100% freedom of press or expression. But in Egypt, the margin of freedom of expression was gradually getting bigger or wider. But after the revolution of January 2011, the margin was completely destroyed because we don't have a roof for the freedom of press in our society. During Dr. Morsi's era, everybody was criticizing him, even insulting him in the private TV channels or in the Egyptian media as a whole. But nowadays, as to Al Jazeera, as far as I know, Al Jazeera Masr take a very important actions for the broadcasting license. And I think they already finished their measures and their criteria for the license. But the problem was the broadcasting of the last statement of Dr. Morsi after the statement of the military and after they stepped him down or after they removed him. I think this is a problem with Al Jazeera News and Al Jazeera Egypt. This is a problem. I was a guest in Al Jazeera Mubashir Masr during this attack from the police, and they don't say anything at all. But I think they take orders to stop this tribune, because or after they broadcasted the last statement of Dr. Morsi. Al Jazeera in general, and I support your guest in the studio, that it was accused all the time that it is pro Dr. Morsi and pro Muslim Brotherhood.
Bashir, what about
yes?
What about this accusation that the other stations that were shut down, specifically three of them, Al Nas, Al Rahma, and Al Hafiz? They were all accused of inciting violence to those who opposed Mohammed Morsi, and so many in Egypt would say that they got what they deserved.
Yeah. I also was a guest many times for most of these channels, especially Anas TV channel. Really, some programs and some broadcasters on these TV channels, sometimes they cannot accept and they cannot bear the criticism of the some private Egyptian TV channels like CBC or Al Hayat or any other TV channels. They all the time criticize Dr. Morsi, and they claim and accuse Muslim Brotherhood and some other Islamic movements of extremism, and they all the time ask the authorities to jail them or to put them in prison. So all the time they try to attack or to defeat or to protect Islamists or to defend the Islamists against these accusations. So it was really a media polarization between the Islamic TV channels and the non-Islamic TV channels, and all the time the political polarization between Islamist political parties and the secularist political parties. This reflected or resulted in a confrontation or a media polarization between the two waves of media, Islamic media and the non-Islamic media. So it was really a war through the media. This is my poor opinion in this issue.
Adel Darwish, how is this being viewed in the West, and what is it? I mean, will it further damage Egypt's credibility internationally?
Yeah, I just want to make a very quick comment. Actually, I wasn't expressing opinion about the media being freer compared to Keulen Nasser's era and Sadat. I was just stating facts. And I probably would find it hard to follow Rashid in Cairo because I just like to stick to events and fact. Now I realize actually the police, not the army, that closed it down, and the police to act would need some kind of a court to order. So I really need to know more because I'm really confused now. So it wasn't the military that closed down the thing, but it was the police. And the police can only act with court order, not with the military order. So please give us some coherent facts, not just rambling on. Here in Britain and the West, it's the media is the left-wing media, like the BBC and the Guardian, the Independent. They probably are confusing many things, actually. They confuse election with democracy. Election is only one part and one facet of democracy, which the whole condition is not existing in Egypt. Because we don't have the measures to, or for example, if I have tools to measure something and that new thing doesn't fit my instance, my tools, what am I supposed to do? Some people are twisting what they see to fit the enemy sentiment. I mean, is it a coup or not a coup? It's a very, very complex legal definition here. We see that President Obama and our Prime Minister David Cameron and the Home Secretary, the Foreign Secretary William Hague did not use the word coup. They said military intervention. So the left-wing media, like the BBC, is using it. The more sort of measured media, like the Telegraph and so on, obviously they said no, the military should really pull out and a little bit more.
Just in the last minute or so that we've got left,
at least more balanced with the coverage.
Just in the last minute or so that we've got left, I want to give the last word to Jan Keulen. Where do you see this going forward? What do you think is going to happen next?
Well, I'm afraid, as I said, I think it's a setback. Apart from legalities, it's always bad if newspapers are closed or TVs are closed. Press freedom also is pluralism. Now we have one voice completely silenced. I think that in itself amounts to incitement, and we think, well, we fear for the near future actually.
All right, and on that note, we've got to leave it. Thank you to all three of our guests, Bashir Abdel Fatah, Adel Darwish, and Jan Keulen. And thank you for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. Remember, if you want to send us your feedback, just email your thoughts to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. I'm Hazem Sika. Thanks again for watching. Bye for now.